White and wild black, white and wild black, white and wild black, white and wild black, white and wild black.
I see that you've contributed to different publications. Do you still do that? And what topics or types of pieces do you like to contribute?
Yeah, these days, and I think this is just where my spirit is at this moment. I tend to be writing more pieces about Africa. I tend to be writing more pieces about Blackness, like centered around it in the diaspora, and my personal lineage and my connection to it, how strong it is or the lack thereof. And so, and the thing about submitting pieces, you don't know who's on the other side of that, right? You don't know their ethnic makeup, you don't know their empathy, their compassion. So however deep I go in this circumstance or in this topic, it might not gravitate towards them that way. But the thing I've experienced as I try to go deep as opposed to wide, is the deeper you go in the piece, let it serve you. Don't try to quiet it down, because I think something happened as I was watching literature evolve in my career, because I think I like to pay attention to what's happening in the world, in the world of the business that I call myself to be a participant in. The sentences have gotten quieter. The sentences have gotten less colorful. It's turned into reporting as opposed to exploration. So it's a reportage of what somebody feels as opposed to a colorful exploration of how to convey this to the reader and make them feel everything in as small of a bite size as a sentence you can possibly do it, because they're trying to just get people through the page, right? And my thing these days is, no matter how long a piece is or what I'm writing about, I just want one line that sticks to the ribs. I want one line that is just encapsulates the beauty of what I'm trying to say. Because when I was in undergrad, there's a big referendum against purple prose, what they call purple prose. Is that we don't want this flowery language. If you were writing an essay or you're writing whether it's academic or memoirs, we don't want flowery prose. We don't want too long of a passage. We want to just get to it. And I think that trains a person to remove the artistry from every sentence as possible, right? And so for me at this stage in my career is, I'm going to try to go as deep as possible on these subjects, because it's not being judged about the person I'm submitting to. It's about being participating in just a larger conversation around what these things mean to myself and my great grandchildren. So hopefully, I continue to explore that and not get, pushed out of it by acceptance or denial, because that can also happen too.
No, I feel that. I feel that. I think when we as writers make decisions on what we're going to write, how we're going to write, it really varies based on who you're writing for.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people write for views, they write for readers. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's no judgment. I'm just, it's a statement of fact where some people write for themselves. They
Yeah.
write because it's their legacy or the legacy that they want to live. And I think that's when you see the difference between breadth and depth that you were discussing. That's in my humble opinion.
Well, I'm curious, in your writings, how have you wrestled with that distinction, especially these days when you're writing for whether it is publication or absorption? Like, how do you deal with writing for yourself versus writing for readers?
I always write for myself.
Mhm.
If someone is digging it, then, well, all right. But
Mhm.
I always write for myself. Sometimes, depending on the story I'm telling, I may be writing for my loved ones or my children, but for the most part, I'm selfish. I write for me and I choose to share it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because I feel like that's how you, that's that's what keeps our voices alive. I mean, if everybody is always writing for everything else, then I think that's how you start getting a lot of stories that sound similar, a lot of storylines that we've heard before, that sort of thing. I don't want anybody to read anything that I've ever written and say, "Oh, I've heard that before," or "I know how this is going to end because I read it last week." That's just not what I want from my writing. I want my voice to be heard.
Um, I think that I write for myself, but I also think but I write for myself writ small and writ large. Like I feel like I want I want to impact Black people. I haven't published anything that I'm like that's out there in a certain way. So I don't know if I've experienced the pressures of trying to find an audience or please an audience or anything like that. I did submit one piece to an anthology and I thought it was absolutely brilliant and I got rejected. That's the only thing that I've ever submitted. But I noticed that I wrote what I spoke from my throat. I said what I said and I meant what I wrote. But then I wondered when it got rejected or when it wasn't accepted, I wondered, well, who was reading it and why wasn't it accepted? And I know from working a little bit in college admissions or whatever that you never know what someone is trying to put together on the other side. It could be about you and it could have nothing to do with you. But because it's my work, it felt very personal. Like, this is brilliant. So I don't know if once I put things out there in a certain way, if I'll start shifting to try to hit the trends or, write for the gram. Oh, this will look good on a post.
Yeah.
I don't think so because I don't really think that's my personality, but I definitely want my work to help us to grow and to develop and to come more to ourselves, to love ourselves more, to understand the power and the beauty that is us, that is you. Like, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what came up for me.
No, yeah, that absolutely does.
Hmm.
I often have similar experiences when I try to get something across to a reader, I try my best to think about the reader, but I also try to my best to just think about what I need to say, right? And it will find its audience at some point. It may not be today, it may not be
Exactly.
tomorrow. It will find it.
Exactly. And that's how I feel. I feel like if I'm writing my truth and I'm writing my experience, that it is going to resonate with someone. It is going to stick with someone. When you talk about that one line that sticks to your ribs, it is going to find the people it needs to find. I believe that. And so it's when I say I write for myself, I'm always writing for Black people. But I am them and they are me. That's how I feel. And so I know that that writing is going to find who it needs to find. I just really believe that. And so, I remind myself of that when, I'm still a new writer and people are still not familiar with my work. And so early on, I would get sometimes I would get kind of down because I'm like, well, how come, nobody is responding, or not nobody, but for the most part, people just didn't know me as a writer. But I got over that because I feel like it's going to find who it needs to find. And that's more important to me personally than, you know, somebody reviewing my book and it goes viral on wherever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that reality is it's some I think it's the first frontier of producing Black anything, right? The first frontier, because like in Unwrappable, one of my favorite chapters is the meditation on Black art. And it's based off of a piece that Langston Hughes wrote, is the Negro artist in the racial mountain. How the number one barrier between the Black artist and the world is the fact that, one, white people are listening, right? And two, that there is a need for the Black artist to commodify the art to just desire to be an artist, right? And so, how does that tension live within in the Black artist? Well, especially now when the white world is trying to consume all that is Black. And so I call it in the piece the racial avalanche as opposed to the racial mountain. Like it is we're going to get consumed by white. And so the choice that all Black art has to make is either you double down and say, yo, I'm going to write this because it's important to me and I think it's valuable for my people, whether it is 1,000 people or one person. If one person reads that sentence that uplifts them, it's more important than 1,000 white readers saying we like this Black artist, right? So I think that's the first frontier when we're trying to publish our stories is, okay, if will I take that risk? Am I comfortable just doubling down on being Black and accepting that I want 3 readers to just consistently enjoy my material as opposed to 1,000 readers passively enjoying it,
I think it's so interesting that you said take that risk. And my husband and I've been thinking about my husband the whole time because in the Black Writers Group 2 weeks ago or last week, we had a man, I don't know, but there was a man who was Tony Neighbors was our writer of the week. And one of the things that he's passionate about is showing the fullness of who he is to other men so that to encourage them to be full human beings instead of being limited to this is what masculinity is. But like, yeah, I'm scared. I that's how I'm interpreting it. But thinking about him as a Black man writing, thinking about you as a Black man writing, think about my husband as a Black man writing, the 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 fact that we even have to that is so few of us in a way out here, but then that we have to be like, oh, am I going to take the risk and be me? And it's like it's so frustrating because it's like I just want us to just be we. Just let's just be we. I understand the world that we're in or the world that we're experiencing, a lot of us, and that it's not always that simple. But yeah, do I want to take the risk and like double down and be Black? And he's working on a logo called Deliberately Black, because one of the things we talk about is the fact that if you don't double down and be like, oh, this is who I am, then the drift, it's like if you're steering, you in LA. It's like if you're steering, or not LA, but California, I guess you drive. But if your steering column is a little shifted, I don't know the proper term, but if you just let go, it's going to veer to the right. You have to like deliberately drive. You have to be who you are, because the overall ambiance is going in a different direction. It's always veering toward whiteness. It defaults to whiteness. What it is always. So yeah, it's not a question. It was just a protest.
Yeah. And a strong one, especially around that word risk. That word risk, it's heavily connotated as a negative experience, or can result in a negative experience if the risk doesn't go the way you think. And I think the sad part, like you communicate, there's so few Black writers on multiple levels. On it seems like when it comes to the widescreen publishing, there's only a couple they let in at a time that can actually tell stories at a high level. And the question again is, what do we do with our own? And I think a lot of the reform in whether it is in these journals, it starts with the power of our voices and letting them know like there's a lot of Black material that we can pull from and that these people should accept inside of the journals. It just depends on how powerful we can communicate our experience, how singular is like, okay, can this mean something powerful? And is it one of one? Or is it something that can be reproducible by another person or even AI these days, you know?
Yeah. And I'm like, it's not for me, it's not even about communicating to them. It's about us. This is who I am, and we're getting our word out. We're controlling our narrative, not going through anybody else, not having to, even in a small part of you think, well, will this be accepted or how will this be changed? But just us doing it our way, through us, for us, by us. Fuck Leopold and all of his people, his descendants in that value system. Forget them, you
Mm.
know? So go ahead.
But for me, that's why, and I know we all know this, so I'm gonna say it out loud. That's why platforms like this, Writing While Black, are important, because that word risk, and I felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rais, that you were going this direction, that risk doesn't, to me, well, just not even to me, risk is not always a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
When we say risk, it doesn't necessarily mean, if we're taking the risk, it's not necessarily having to do with the white gaze or mainstream. It's also a risk as a writer, making yourself vulnerable, because that's what you're doing when you put yourself on the page. We can talk about risk within our own community, or just a risk for our own sense of person, because it is vulnerable when you write truth and you put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
No matter who's reading it or who's accepting it or who it's resonating with, that is a risk,
Mm-hmm.
and especially, I mean, it's a risk no matter what type of writing you do. I was going to say especially if you do memoir or something like that, but even still, it's a risk any writing you do, because that is your art. That is your baby. Those are your words. And, as artists, we be sensitive about our shit. You know what I'm saying? you know,
100%.
so, so so that word risk, I want to reframe that, because it's not just about, yeah, I'm talking about us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whenever I'm talking about us.
Yeah. I'll give an example. The when it comes to writing, like a lot of what I write is about religion and spirituality, and because that's just the context by which I was raised. Um, and I can't tell you how many times just amongst our people where it's always an interesting conversation when individuals find out I'm not a practicing Christian. And I say I've leaned towards the East, right? That itself can be alienating to some folks by communicating that I am not a practicing Orthodox Christian. I don't believe in I'm open and respectful of it, but sometimes it can be harder for people to get into the religious conversation that I'm trying to engender if they know that's where I'm starting from, right? Of course, writing is writing, experience is experience. There's some great minds out there that are able to accept the work for what it is, regardless of the religious background that I come from. But it's just about the reference point that people have. Like, what reference point? And if they don't, because I love my people so much, if they don't, if they read a word and it's more codified in Eastern philosophy, and they say, nah, I thought I was gonna like his material, but he's a Buddhist. Can I take that with my chin up? Say it's fine, you know. Or do I think, I want to find a way to reach that person, even though I believe in Buddhism? That's the thing you weigh when you're being your authentic self.
And I think it also depends on why people consume art,
Mm,
why people consume writing, why they read, how they're going into a piece. Because for me, as long as it ain't no hate speech or something, if the writing is on point, I'm gonna read it.
mm, mhm.
And it could be a genre that I don't even usually read, but if the writing is on point, I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna want some more,
Mm,
and especially I like to learn. So again, it depends on why people are picking it up,
yeah.
because if 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 you're open, if you're a reader and you want to read, then some of that other position, not position, but some of the other belief systems can be secondary. Now, with that said, there are some hot button issues, and
Mm.
religion is one of them. You see, I said religion in the air quotes. Religion is one of them. Earlier, you were saying something early on, and you said religion and politics. I was like, oh Lord, he just diving all into the deep end. Because they're saying, I remember when I worked in corporate, there were certain conversations I was never going to have in the office. Religion was one of them because I'm gonna piss everybody off. Religion, po- politics, I wasn't talking about that anyway, but religion, politics, and reproductive freedom, those were ones that I was not ever, never going to bring up. I wasn't going to jump into the conversation because, you know, it could get ugly and I could bring the ugliness, and I wasn't, that's not what I was going to do. And corporate world, they didn't know this Ioka. I was very detached, went in, did my thing, left out. Had on my ancestral armor. Yeah. Got in,
Wow.
got out.
Mm. No, then I'm sorry, it's about to turn into me interviewing you guys, but when all these, do you write about your experience in corporate and your journey to Costa Rica? Is that something that you frequently write about?
I have not. I've done one or two podcasts specifically about that because people were interested. I feel like I will write at some point about my decision more to leave the States versus where I ended up. I have plenty of poetry dedicated to Costa Rica, which I'll probably publish at some point. The corporate stuff, I don't even know that I want to revisit all that and the feelings and everything. I'm done with that part of my life. I don't think I want to write that. And there are other books writing it. There are other, specifically, a lot of Black women are writing about their experience. And I know their experience is not my experience, but I'm just saying they're writing and I think it's, a catharsis. They're writing for healing and also probably writing to impart their wisdom or learned wisdom to other, young women maybe coming through. But yeah, no, I'm good on that.
Hmm.
In the upcoming Black Writers Group anthology, it's called Our Freedom.
Mhm.
And one of the pieces that I submitted is from a work in progress. Um, is it work in progress or work in process? But anyway, called it's the working title is contract marriage. But the woman moves from Detroit to Costa Rica, or a fictionalized version of Costa Rica. And so I
Angela?
put, pardon me?
Is her name Angela?
No, her name is not
And
Angela,
I
and
know.
she is not me. But I've pulled out different in that story in particular. I've kind of explored the experience of Black migrants or Black expats or Black refugees in, places that aren't home. I don't even have a home. Shit. My tribe is just out here floating. Somebody said in the meeting the other day something I wanted to write down. But so I have little segments of different people's stories, and different little characters who. So I'm exploring it because it's a part of it's a part of my experience. So it's going to show up. Who I am is going to show up, in my work. I wanted to loop back around to, people picking up. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? And that, for example, when I dated, I had to come to the realization, and I think it's the same with, with anything in life, that everything is not for everybody. Everybody ain't for everybody. And so I'm me, and I can't really be anybody else. Like you said, Ayoka, if I'm busy trying to be somebody else and ain't nobody being Angela, and God created, we all got a role to play. We need to stay in our lanes. But that our voices and our stories and our perspectives are so important. And for us to come from who we are authentically is so important, and those of us who are called to be artists, it's especially important for us to honor that as much as we can. Of course we're humans and we struggle with what we struggle with, but when you said, that you weren't a tortured artist, and that, you just had to come from where you were, like I feel like I love that. I love that. I love that. It rang something else for me, but I didn't capture it in my notes. I wanted to go back to it, but I can't even remember right now. But yeah, a lot of times the vulnerability that we feel as artists when we put stuff out, I've noticed, is more in us than
Mhm.
actually in other people's experience of it. We had someone submit something the other day, and they said, "Oh, it's," and so I was thinking, "Oh, what am I going to read?" And then when I read it, I'm kind of like, but for them, it probably felt, because it was their heart on the page. It rang, it was beautiful, but I wasn't, it didn't, I'm like, you felt vulnerable because you put your heart out there, but I just received your love. I just received your heart. It's nothing, don't even, we feel it, but other people may not feel it that way. So,
So, Rais, what type of conversations are you looking to spark from your work?
Man, a lot of honestly, it's the conversations that we've been having for the past 30 minutes, truthfully.
Yeah.
I think there's a destiny for the Black artist, that helps shape the way this country moves. Um, I don't even like to use this word too much, because I think this word is very again, negatively connotated, but oppressed people and the stories that oppressed people tell are what shifts humanity forward, right? Because those who are in control of the power structure, they're too busy to feel on the ground level. And so when you hear stories, when you have something in your heart that you want to communicate, those are the things that move the grand arc of human narrative a little bit forward. And the more I look into, again, to dig back into it, the more I look into even religion, those are stories that were passed on by oppressed people. When I look at mythology, whether it's Native American mythology, Inca mythology, a lot of the stories in the Christian text and the Christian symbology, those are oppressed people telling stories to get through a very harsh and brutal time. So that's where the next change of, I feel, is important for our people to just remember the importance of the narrative. The narrative is what is always going to rise us up and connect us all across space and time. There can be somebody reading a story that all three of us write today, that they can be feeling that story in Cuba. They can be feeling that story in Angola. They can be feeling that story in Nairobi. And I think that's the importance of the narrative, is connecting all across space and time. So I just hope that I continue to just feel inspired by doing that. I used to tell my friends, I hope I never change. And they were like, no, growth is great. But I know what I mean by not changing. I want to consistently maintain that there's a responsibility that I feel I have to at least try my best. Because if I don't, who will? So just try my best to just continue to just put my best foot forward on what I want for storytelling, especially Black storytelling. These pieces are long. But I could read probably one of my favorite parts of there's a piece in here called the grand narrative. So I separated. So there's some pieces that have chapters inside of chapters, right? Um, and so this one is called the grand narrative, and it starts. There's this quote I love: "Life is made up of the small things." It suggests that while we are capable of achieving big and great things, it's the little things we see, cherish, and remember. We might feel accomplished after graduating, getting promoted, or being recognized for something we've worked hard at. But what about the in-between moments? Who do we become in the quiet? What do the small, unseen parts of our day say about the people we're becoming? Becoming a man was not a big task. It was filled with little things. Over time, I felt myself transforming into something different. Jolts like being called sir for the first time stayed with me. I remember feeling uncertain and self-doubting, questioning if I had any right to claim the title of sir. Although it may seem insignificant, being called sir reminded me that I was changing. The first time a teenager called me sir at the corner store, half respectful, half teasing, I laughed, but it stuck with me. As we grow older, our values and perspectives on life shift gradually, often without us even realizing it. The memories of our youth become almost mythical, taking on a poetic and heroic quality in our imagination. We reminisce a bit more, and as we age, we yearn for the simplicity and purity of our past experiences. But the reality is, we can never fully recapture the innocence of our youth. Trying to remain innocent is like trying to hold water in a fist. Impossible. Buddhist teachers speak of Shoshin, the beginner's mind, a way of seeing the world with the openness and curiosity of a child. In that state, wonder is natural, and every moment feels alive with possibility. As we grow older, certainty crowds out curiosity. We trade openness for judgment, questions for conclusions. Yet if innocence cannot be kept, perhaps it can be reclaimed in this way. We cannot return to childhood, but we can return to the child's gaze. We can at least try to recover that beginner's mind, to look at the world not with possession, but with astonishment. Innocence then becomes less about purity and more about presence, a way of remembering how to live.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mhm.
said, I need the physical book.
Mm-hmm. Presence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that was so I remember when I was first called sir. It was at a CVS. I was honestly an undergraduate in college. I was probably 24 years old. And I was checking out and it's an 18-year-old and he said, "Will that be all for you, sir?" And I had to look around like, is he talking to me? Like it can't be. I cannot be the sir in this moment. And I just felt so undeserving of this young man looking at me with that reverence to be called sir. And I had to ask myself again, unpack, like, why do you feel undeserving of being called sir? And then I started looking at my life and it's early on in the book, I just talk about how when you leave home, you also require or desire that familiarity that home used to provide. And I think as we further stray away from home, we start to wonder, well, where do I fit if there's not a place we call home? And so I just was always curious of how far I've come and to be honored, honestly, and especially now in my life that so many young people come to me for advice. It's a moment of privilege that I just don't like to take for granted. So I try to earn the fact that I am looked at as sir by some people.
Yes, sir. What
That
types of
idea.
advice do people seek from you?
So these days dating advice, um, a lot of times it's career advice. And then sometimes it's just life advice, just life in general. But those tend to be and since I started writing, sometimes it's writing advice too, how to get things on the page and, revision advice. I'm often a beta reader for some folks. So it's a wide range of perspective that people come and ask me for.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing your work and for writing and, sharing your energy.
Yes.
Thanks. Gratitude.
I am a huge fan of your writing, in case you didn't know that by now.
Thank you, guys.
Wow. Okay. I want to hear some more. Okay.
Can you talk about you work with a publisher? Can you talk about why you chose to do that, what your experience has been?
Yeah, my experience with the publisher has been it's good if you don't expect much. I would say that. Like if you are comfortable with, especially independent publishing, if you're comfortable with you doing majority of the work outside of them printing the material, self-publishing is honestly great. It provides a freedom um, that I think I don't know what it would be like if I was published by a major and I had, a literary agent and all that, all those type of guardrails. But I think the freedom in publishing independently, it's a I don't think you should do it if you want to be famous. If you want a machine that's trying to bolster your voice, I think some people should try to look for mainstream independent publishing. But independent publishing is just provides you a freedom. You can do whatever you want. Like I have a friend who is working on traditional publishing, and they stipulate everything down to what they can publish on Medium, or Substack. And I don't even know if that's worth the experience if I can just write whatever I want on Substack, write whatever I want on Medium, and then let my published material live. So it's been a great, like I published with Author House. Author House is a great publisher. They handle a lot of the work, a lot of the material. Before they used to not do in-house revisions. The most they used to do is look for things of like libel and slander inside of your material. But these days they pay more attention to formatting. They give a first pass of, we think this chapter should go here and so on and so forth. So they've evolved their involvement in the experience, but they've been a great partner for both the books, my first book and my second one.
Mm. So what's the name of your science fiction book?
Wasage.
Oh, Ayoka, you had mentioned that. You said you wanted to talk about that.
Right. Just because we hadn't given any time or attention to it. Right.
I
He
heard you.
made one mention earlier when he was talking about science fiction,
And
but
you mentioned it was like 700 pages long.
Yeah.
740. Did you say that?
It's 704.
Oh, 704. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the story? What's the concept? What's the elevator pitch? What's the book summary?
Yeah, that book I wrote when I was 23 years old. Sometimes I don't even like, you write something when you're young and then you look back and you see the flaws. I'm trying to learn how to love that book for what it is. It was my first foray trying to write science fiction, and I think it just meant so much to me at the time. Those specific ideas came to me in a dream. So I would dream and I'd journal them down. I'd keep a dream journal at the time, and so I'd just be writing these ideas. But for the most part, Swassage is a story about a brother and a sister. They're trying to survive a dystopian world, but while making it back to their parents. Technology called a brain companion. It's no different than what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, right? And every citizen has it, no different than a cell phone. But Sage, she conquers the demands of her Neuralink slash brain companion by focusing on the love of her brother. She has to protect her brother, and she disobeys the technology. And I think at that time when I wrote it, AI wasn't a big thing, but I saw it coming up the road a little bit, and it's really just trying to communicate that no matter how technologically advanced we get, the thing that's going to always remain at the core of humanity is our humanity, loving each other and caring for each other. And so nowadays I can become detached from reality, but that book was just an ode to that. Like, hey, no matter what we experience, no matter how far or how apart we become, what's at the core of it all is humans, like how much we can rely on each other to love each other and care for each other.
Okay. All right. I got you. That sounds beautiful. I love it feels like something to read. You also mentioned that you have a Medium and a Substack.
Yeah, I have a Medium and a Substack. I more so lean on Medium.
Do you cross publish or do you see them as two? Because everybody these days in the Black Writers Group is talking Substack, Substack, Substack.
Yeah,
Do you
I
cross publish
I
or
cross. I cross.
okay.
Yeah. But there is difference in style. Therein lies the age-old question of it's no pun intended, it's a reader's medium, right? So how you write is based on how the readers consume on these platforms. Like Substack prefers more essayistic prose, more slow, deliberate, walk you through what I'm feeling. Medium prefers more reportage, right? So tell me exactly what happens. Um, and so, depending on upon what you want for each platform, then you tailor your style to fit that. I go for both. I just say what I post on one, I'm post on the other, and let's just see how the readership. Because for me, I just think about again that library. I'm trying to build a library of material. Like I say, this brother wrote about everything. Irrespective of who reads it today, my kids can go back and say, "Oh, father or my grandkids, grandpa wrote about this, 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 and this."
Mhm. So where can people find you?
Medium, Substack, and Amazon. I don't have a social media.
Oh, okay. I couldn't find you on social media. So who are you? How do we find you on Medium and Substack?
But this Rais Tuluka.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. That's easy. Okay. Now how we talked a little bit about how readers can find you. How have you found readers?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, Conversation, honestly, it's been person to person. That's how I really found readers. It's been again community. The internet is vast, so occasionally I can find readers. Like when I published my first book, I would go on speaking engagements, and I'd find so many people that way. I would talk to so many people doing speaking engagements, I'd forget to sell my book. I just enjoyed talking to people and getting to know.
Mm,
I would just use my book as a way for these places to accept this young black man talking, and I just get there and just meet people. And I think that's what I enjoy doing more than anything is just, hey, yeah, I wrote Iron Wrapped the Wool, but I would much more rather talk to you as like, what are you up to? Who are you? What is your writing career? What is your writing journey like? Or what is your reader journey like? Because readership habits are changing these days. Like, what do you read? What are you into? And I think that anecdotal experience honestly helps me more than um, me just sitting in my laboratory and writing all day. So I like talking to people out in the world.
mm. So what are you reading these days?
It varies. It varies. I'm reading Roberto Bolaño, 2666. I'm reading, I just read Project Hail Mary for the first time. I think that's an interesting book. I'm reading Fingerprint of the Gods by Graham Hancock. I'm reading a lot of things as much as possible. Try to read, try to read like an hour a day of something.
Are you working on any new projects?
A couple. I'm working on a short story collection. I'm working on two new essay collections, and I'm working on. Funny you mentioned Swassage. I'm reworking Swassage to
You're
what
massaging, massage.
I'm Swassage into a new version with my current lens.
That'd
Oh.
be interesting.
Hmm.
Okay.
So I'm giving it a new approach because I think I just love the characters so much in that material. And for me, like character always comes first, and from out of there, the plot and all that stuff develops from. So I just love those characters. Just let them go.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss or share that we haven't discussed or shared yet in these 18 hours that we spent together?
I feel like we touched on a lot. I would just say there is and the importance of what spaces, and it sounds like even outside of this podcast, there's spaces that you guys are creating, and I cherish that so much because writing groups where we can listen to each other, we give honest feedback, and we can just build amongst each other. I think those are sacred spaces. And so, to commend the work, to commend and appreciate, even in preparation for this, I looked at a couple of interviews on YouTube and just went down a little rabbit hole. And I think how you both hold space to let the writer just speak freely of their experience, and I think that's just commendable, right? So just a moment to give you all your flowers. And again, I can imagine type of space that you hold in person. So yeah, I think that touches it.
Thank you. That's very sweet. I'm gonna take them flowers behind you. Do you have a community? Do you feel like you have, I mean, I know it sounds like your family is very supportive. Do you feel like you have a good writers community? You're reading arcs and, mentoring people. Do you
Yeah,
feel like you have good support?
it's developed slowly over time. It's developed slowly over time. There's a great app called Meetup, and when I was in undergrad, I would just meet up with some writers, and that writing group has consistently carried themselves over the past, 7 years or so. So, but again, it's a slow build, trying to build a wide enough community that listen, artists, they sometimes you got to find the right way to get feedback, and you get feedback the wrong way, they never come back to the meetup. So you got to try to be very delicate, and learning that has been a big part of my writing career as well. Building that, feeling like I'm not on an island. I'm not just one crazy person trying to tell stories. There's a bunch of tell stories.
Mm-hmm. A bunch of crazy people trying to tell stories. Yeah. Yeah. I have this image in my head of the Black arts movement, or even, like where the people got together and they wrote and they argued and they created, and you can see it in their work that they were feeding off of each other and interact, where it's that kind of thing. Like, we're doing it for the people. We're the creative arm of, Black freedom. That's who we are. That's why we got to, that's my and that's a slow build. That's a slow build. All right. Do you happen to have a pen handy? I know I talked to somebody the other day and they say I don't even use a pen. I use a keyboard.
I have a pen somewhere.
All right.
Let me go grab one. Be right back.
Okay. Or you can use your imaginary pen for the
Let's do it.
since we're writers.
Sign off.
For the sign off. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure, a pleasure, a pleasure, and an enlightenment. I feel fully embodied. I wrote down I have you saying it 3 times, with my full-bodied man, fully embodied. I really wanted to do something with it, but I just did now. But I feel full. My body feels full. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening and watching. Grab your pens. Right on. Right on. You didn't get the choreography. Or you could do right on. Right on.
Got it.
There you go.
Got it. Thank you. Blessings.
Blessing. Go
Thank
out
you
and
so
make it
much.
a wonderful day. Keep telling your stories. We need you. We need you.
Yeah.
Peace.
White and wild black.